Hello and welcome to the Motoring News Zone, the show where we take you for all the biggest stories in the world of cars right now. This week, Arizona has tightened its tinted windows laws. Ford CEO Jim Farley has predicted an irreversible shift in the auto industry due to Trump's tariffs. And speaking of tariffs as well, President Donald Trump has doubled the tariffs levied on India. Find out why and a whole lot more in today's show. If you're watching on YouTube, skip to the timestamps in the video description below to see the story that you are most interested in. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, has been saying some interesting stuff in the media the last few weeks or so. Very much a figure that you either love or hate, really, when it comes to how he runs Ford and what he's been saying about Chinese automobiles and how they are potentially going to take over the world, about his reaction to tariffs. And again, tariffs are very much on the agenda for conversation because he is predicting a seismic shift in the auto industry as a result of the latest developments regarding tariffs. What has Farley said and how is it going to affect the industry? Let's have a look, guys, here on the channel as always. From the beginning, many economists warned that the full effects of President Donald Trump's unprecedented trade war wouldn't be felt until the second half of the year. As US companies finish reporting their first half financial results, it's clear they have also felt the pain immediately, and it can and probably will get worse. The auto industry has been especially affected by the tariffs. In theory, these tariffs are meant to help the domestic auto producers. After all, these tariffs are only placed upon vehicles that are imported into the United States and also parts that are imported into the United States, even if they are assembled in the US. So in theory, the domestic producers, the likes of Ford, the likes of Chevrolet, Chrysler, all those guys, it's meant to help all of them. But it's not quite that simple because as we've covered here many times on the channel, guys, a lot of these vehicles are imported from abroad. And if the vehicles themselves aren't imported from abroad, they are often manufactured from parts that are in fact imported from other countries. So they are subject to tariffs. Now this has really hit this has really hurt the profit margins of a lot of these companies. And in fact, because of that, we are seeing the price of new cars rise as a result. And as a knock-on of that, used cars are also going up in price too. And a lot of US automakers are going to be a bit worried at the moment because the US has secured a trade deal with both Japan and also Korea as well. Instead of 25% tariffs, they have 15%. And a lot of these companies in the US, they do manufacture their cars in Canada and Mexico. And even though these countries are next door, they are subject currently to 25% tariffs rather than 15%. So in fact, the Japanese and the Korean manufacturers in some senses do have an advantage over those in the US, actually in the US itself. And it's interesting as we look at the landscape overall of sales of cars in the United States. General Motors are the highest in terms of their market share. They are estimated to have around 17% of the new car market. Toyota, though, from Japan are number 2 at 15%, with Ford at 13%. Hyundai is 4th with 11%, and Honda is at 9%. So 3 of the top 5 are in fact foreign automakers in the United States. That shows you the overall market share that they have. Now, some of the big 3 have been hit harder than others. Stellantis have probably been hit the hardest out of the 3 because they are not solely a US-based company. They're also made up of European manufacturers as well. And in fact, half the vehicles that Stellantis sell in the US are actually imported from abroad currently. Ford, for example, they have 77% of their vehicles actually made in the US that are sold in the US. So a lot of those will not be affected by the tariffs. However, around half of Stellantis will be and are. And Jim Farley, like I said in the intro, has been saying a few interesting things about this. He's saying that this was very much going to shift the car market, shift the auto industry in the United States, and it may never go back to what it was before. But is that a particularly bad thing? I mean, well, the likes of Ford and GM are investing billions into their US manufacturing plants in order to get them either upgraded or up and running again from being dormant for so long, all in the aim of reducing the impact of tariffs placed upon them. That's not going to be immediate. Ford have already reported they've lost around $2 billion because of the tariffs. So in theory, they should be able to get that $2 billion back before too long. And in fact, they weren't the highest selling brand of car in the US until this half of the year. It's been a long time since they managed to do that. And here's what Farley said on the future of the auto industry in the US. We increasingly see Europe, North America and Asia becoming kind of regional businesses with trade tariff rates that are aligned for those 3 or 4 regions. And I believe that this is a very long-term change. And the regions will pick them. So I believe this is quite a fundamental change. So basically what he's saying is that the US is following with Europe and China to an extent as well, different parts of Asia, that there are these brands, these local brands that are very much given an advantage, and the US for the longest time wasn't doing that, but now in theory it is. So we'll see what happens with this, guys. Interesting predictions from Farley here when it comes to the future of the auto industry in the US, but do you go along with it? Do you think he's right? Is it going to change irreparably, as some people have described it? And of course, we've got to say, we can't not mention the fact that these tariffs are not being paid for by foreigners. They are not being paid for by companies outside of the US, by people outside of the US. So far, they are being paid for by customers in the US, drivers in the US, and also businesses in the US as well. All that money is going to the government. Whether it's going to actually be used for something useful by the government, that's a totally different debate, but I'm just saying that's the situation as it is at the moment. It's official, guys. It's the end of an era. The US Army is abandoning the Humvee. They are going for a cheaper, faster alternative. The classic Humvee, which has really been a symbol of the US Army for at least the last 30, 40 years or so, it is going to be no more soon. They are not going to be ordering any more of them. But what are they replacing them with? And is this a good move from the Army? Let's have a look, guys. But why are they getting rid of the Humvee? Well, it's basically too big and bulky for what a lot of people are foreseeing is going to be the battles of the future. A battle that a lot of people are believing is going to involve China at some point, but I'll let you guys debate that in the comments below. So instead of going big and bulky, they are going lighter and more agile. And we're seeing some of this play out in Ukraine right now, where big bulky vehicles are being bombed relentlessly by drones in the air. Basically, if you're not quick, you won't survive, even if you've got a lot of armour. And the replacement is being dubbed the very inventively named Squad Infantry Vehicle. Essentially, it's a stretched out, stripped down, all-terrain vehicle without doors or a roof, and has seating for up to 9 soldiers. And the army plans to install hundreds of drones to spy on and attack enemies from this vehicle. And it's significantly lighter. Like I said, this is thousands of pounds lighter, in fact, and around $80,000 cheaper than the average Humvee. Essentially, the infantry squad vehicle is based on the Chevrolet Colorado truck. And 80% of the truck, whether it is components, whether it is actual parts for that, are the same as what you would get for the army. It's just that 20% that makes the difference. And that's a key part about all this as well. As long as you have relatively basic parts, you can always repair it. Whereas currently with the Humvee, you have to have something that's relatively specialist for the army to be able to actually repair it in the event of an accident or any kind of attack. But the army is not hiding away from the fact that not everybody's going to be happy about this change. After all, the thick armour for these Humvees has saved dozens, if not hundreds of lives in the combat zones of Iraq and Afghanistan as well. But they have defended their decision by saying the speed and agility of these vehicles will more than make up for it. And the fact that there are all these drones also on the vehicle too will allow them to scout ahead and find any kind of danger that is lurking in front of them. Yeah, interesting, guys. Definitely a big change, something that is an icon of the US military, has been for the last 40 years or so. Before that, it was the Jeep, then it was the Humvee, now it's the infantry squad vehicle. We'll have to see how things kind of work out when it comes to that. But I got an interesting case study here, an interesting comment that I've seen on MSN from Randy Bisbee here, who claimed that he spent 30 years in the army. And he actually defended the army's decision to do this, saying, quote, "He saw it all, in and out of combat zones, in and out of the Cold War, driven or rode in every iteration of vehicle during those years. His view on the next war includes mostly drone warfare, battlefield laser weapons, sound and vibration weapons rather than tanks and armour. Tech will be used more and more now, human struggles less and less. Air superiority followed by drone warfare on a massive scale by all parties. Campsites, FAOs and CPs will need to sport an umbrella that defeats drones to survive. Battlefield direct point EMP devices will be in use. There will of course be tanks and troops in use as well during these transition years, but much less than previously. This vehicle will be useful." And for a guy that's got decades of experience in the army, I'm going to take his word on it. It does make sense, but I want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments on this as always. Do you think it's a shame it's being phased out? Do you think it's time? Do you think this is the right move by the army? I want to hear what you have to say in the comments below. Driving laws in the United States in general are really tightening right now, and we've covered quite a few of them, whether these are seatbelt laws, whether these are speeding laws, whether these are license plate laws. We've covered all of them. And there's a new one coming in that could give you some very hefty fines if you were in the state of Arizona. What is this change? When is it coming into effect? And how can you avoid falling foul of this new regulation? Let's have a look, guys. Got the full story for you here, as always. Now, this new law is to do with tinted windows. Of course, there's been a few changes regarding this as well. I think Louisiana is going about changing this at the moment, and Arizona is doing a similar thing. The southwestern state has a law that inhibits drivers from making their windows too dark, basically on safety grounds. Drivers in the state of Arizona must allow at least 33% of light to pass through their windows on the front of the car. This is known as visible light transmission, or VLT. Basically, is a percentage point of how opaque or how transparent your windows are. So this means that effectively 1/3 of light has to go through the windows. Again, it's a safety thing. If visibility is poor, if it is dark, if there is a sandstorm or something like that, which is not unheard of course, in somewhere like Arizona, you want to be able to see out of your windows. If it's bright and sunny, which it usually is in Arizona, then it's all good. But if it's darker, if it's more difficult, you could struggle to see out of them. But interestingly, in Arizona, the regulations around tinted windows are a little bit more lax than quite a few states in the union. In fact, there are no regulations about the back window or the side window, so in theory, these could be absolutely as dark as night. But you are not allowed to tint your windows in either a red or amber colour. That is banned no matter what percentage of VLT it is at. And when it comes to reflective glare as well, that is also heavily limited. Again, a very sunny state, a very hot state most of the year. So that makes sense. It's nothing to do with visibility for you, but it's to do with visibility for other drivers passing by you as well. So reflectivity of your windows is limited to 35%. You cannot go above that. But in general, it's not really... But in general, for a first-time offence, if this is an honest mistake by you, you will often not get a proper ticket. You will not be fined for this offence. If a police officer does spot that you've got a window that is potentially too dark or too reflective or of a tint colour that is not allowed in Arizona, you will normally get what is called a fix-it ticket. Basically a slap on the wrist, a warning that you need to go and get this repaired. Or should I say change? It's not really broken, it's just pushing the boundaries a little bit too much. But yeah, there you go, guys. Arizona tightening its regulations when it comes to tinted windows. Does this surprise you? Is this a sensible thing to do? Get your thoughts in the comments below. Don't you just hate people who are going too slowly in the overtaking lane when you're on the highway? It's one of the most infuriating things there. There are 3 lanes, if not more, for a reason, and you only go into the one that is on the far left in case you need to overtake. That is what it is for, and if you're going underneath the speed limit when you're in that lane, it's just downright dangerous and very, very annoying. But if you're in Louisiana as of August 1st, this is already coming to effect as I record this video, you could well be punished for it. If you get caught going 1 mile per hour underneath the speed limit in that state, in the overtaking lane, you could well get a fine for that. So let's have a look at this change, guys. Let's have a look at what's altering here on the channel as always, and whether I think this is the correct move from the state, and whether it should be rolled out nationwide, because I'm pretty sure people will be absolutely of the opinion that people that go too slowly in these lanes are very much a hazard and are very, very annoying. Louisiana is absolutely tightening things up right now when it comes to their driving. They are tightening the rules around mobile phone usage while you're driving, left lane driving, window tinting, and insurance requirements as well. When it comes to cell phones, you are no longer permitted to hold or use a phone by hand while driving, including texting, social media, and manually scrolling maps, which if you're doing that thing while you are driving, come on, man, what are you doing? What are you playing at? That's just downright dangerous. The only exception to this is if the vehicle is stopped in a safe place, or you are able to go hands-free when it comes to these decisions. Or if you're able to use hands-free features on your phone, such as voice control, that's all fine, you just can't use your hands. Let's get back to the topic at hand. What about that left lane driving, the overtaking lane? If you're going too slowly in that, what is going to happen to you? Well, if you are found going below the speed limit in the far left lane, in a highway, in Louisiana, you will be fined $150 for your first offence. And that will increase by $100 for every subsequent offence. So if you do it 2 times, it'll be $250. If you do it 3 times, it'll be $350, etc. And if you are a repeat offender, you are at risk of a jail sentence. You can get up to 30 days in jail for this offence if you are a repeat offender. Previously, you had to be going 10 miles underneath the speed Previously, you had to be going 10 miles an hour underneath the speed limit to be caught foul of this law, but now it's just 1 mile per hour. So if the highway is 70 miles an hour, if you're doing 69 miles an hour, that is very much not nice. You will be in trouble if you're in that left-hand lane and you're trying to overtake. Every state has their own laws when it comes to driving. Louisiana is no exception to that. Just to give a quick mention as well to the window tinting rule that I mentioned before. The legal limit for window tinting on the front side windows will decrease from 40 to 25%. when it comes to the light transmission passing through those windows. So if you're above 25% currently, you need to get that checked out and remedied as soon as possible because it is actually illegal from this point. For reference, this is the same limits as Texas and Arkansas, which are next door. But when it comes to insurance, things are changing big time as well. This is being called the no pay, no play insurance law in Louisiana. Drivers who now get into a crash and do not have insurance will be blocked from collecting up to $100,000 in damages, whether they are at fault for the accident or not. Effectively, it's meant to encourage more people to get insurance on their vehicles. So effectively, if you don't have insurance in Louisiana for your car and you're involved in an accident, even if you're not to blame, even if you're a complete innocent victim in that, you could be blocked from getting those damages payments paid to you. But yeah, guys, there we go. Big changes in the state of Louisiana. Some of them we've already covered before, but some of them I wasn't aware of, and they are all in effect as of August 1st. So as I record this on the 4th, they are in place. But yeah, your thoughts in the comments below on these. Is this a reasonable change when it comes to the laws? Is it going too far? I want to hear what you have to say either way. It's not very often I do requests for videos, but I got a really good comment from Akash011, a new subscriber on our YouTube channel. Welcome to the community here on the Motoring Chronicle, Akash. And you know, I'm really glad you brought this to my attention because Donald Trump, the president of the US, has sent a bit of an ultimatum the way of India, and it's all about oil, and it's all, of course, involving Russia as well. Now, this is a complex issue. This has not made too many headlines here in the UK, but I have found a handy BBC article here going over the ins and outs of what's happened. So I'm going to go through this, guys, and give my thoughts on it as always. So shout out to BBC News for covering this. US President Donald Trump has issued an executive order hitting India with an additional 25% tariff over its purchases of Russian oil. That will raise the total tariff on Indian imports into the United States up to 50%, among the highest rates imposed by the United States. The new rate will come into effect in 21 days, so by the 27th of August, according to the executive order. A response from India's foreign ministry on Wednesday said that Delhi had already made it clear what its stance is on imports from Russia and reiterated that the tariff is unfair, unjustified, and unreasonable. It is therefore extremely unfortunate that the US should choose to impose additional tariffs on India for actions that several other countries are also taking in their own national interests, the statement read. India will take all actions necessary to protect its national interests, it added. The US president had earlier warned he would raise levies, saying that India doesn't care how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine. Don't worry. We'll get back onto that. On Wednesday, the White House said in a statement that the Russian Federation's actions in Ukraine pose an ongoing threat to US national security and foreign policy, necessitating stronger measures to address the national emergency. It said India's imports of Russian oil undermine US efforts to counter Russia's activity in Ukraine. It added that the US will determine which countries to import oil from and will recommend further actions to the president as needed. Oil and gas are Russia's biggest exports, and Moscow's biggest customers include China, India, and Turkey. Russia is now the biggest seller of oil to India, accounting for more than 35% of its overall supplies, according to a global commodities data platform, Kepler. Trade data shared with Reuters showed that India bought about 1.75 million barrels of oil a day from Russia in the first half of the year. Speaking later at an event in the White House, Trump took a question from the BBC on the subject and said the tariff on India was just the start. You're going to see a lot more, so much secondary sanctions, he said. The threatened tariff hike follows meeting on Wednesday by Trump's top envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow, which have been aimed at securing peace between Russia and Ukraine. The additional tariff would mean a steep 50% duty on key Indian exports like textiles, gems and jewellery, auto parts and seafood as well, hitting major job-creating sectors. Electronics, including iPhones and pharma, remained exempt for now. Delhi has previously called Trump's threat to raise tariffs over its purchase from Russia, over its trade from Russia, unjustified and unreasonable. In an earlier statement, a spokesperson for India's foreign ministry said the US had encouraged India to import Russian gas at the start of the conflict for strengthening global energy market stability. He said that India began importing from Russia because traditional suppliers were diverted. He said that India began importing from Russia because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe at the outbreak of the conflict. The latest threatened tariff demonstrates Trump's willingness to impose sanctions related to the war in Ukraine, even against nations that the US considers to be important allies or trading partners. This could be a warning that other countries could feel a real bite if Trump ramps up those kinds of sanctions once Friday's deadline passes, when the US president has threatened new sanctions on Russia and to place 100% tariffs on countries that purchase its oil. This would not be the first time that Trump's administration has imposed secondary tariffs, which are also in place to punish buyers of Venezuelan oil as well. India has previously criticised the US, its leading trading partner, for introducing the levies, when the US itself is doing trade with Russia. Last year, the US traded goods worth an estimated $3.5 billion with Russia, despite tough sanctions and tariffs. Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi have in the past referred to each other as friends during Trump's first term, attending political rallies in each other's countries as well. But that has not stopped Trump from hitting India with levies, suggesting diverging interests between New Delhi and Washington. The Federation of India Exports Organizations has called the decision to impose additional tariffs extremely shocking, adding that it will hit 55% of India's exports to America. The tariffs are expected to make Indian goods far costlier in the United States and could cut US-bound exports by between 40 and 50%, according to the Global Trade Research Initiative, GTRI, a Delhi-based think tank. India should remain calm, avoid retaliation for at least 6 months, and recognise that meaningful trade negotiations with the US cannot proceed under threats or mistrust, former Indian trade official and head of GTRI, Ajay Srivastava, said. Yeah, so a lot of words, a lot of things happening there, a lot going on when it comes to India and the US. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I always remember hearing that India has been a big trade partner of Russia for a long time. I think even back into the Soviet days, you know. Of course, let's not get into politics too much over this, but historically, of course, India and China, and to this day, India and China are big rivals. Of course, the Soviet Union and the Chinese, after the Sino-Soviet split in 1953, I think it was, even though they were both communist nations at the time, they very much diverged in terms of their philosophy when it came about how to actually implement all that. So they were rivals for a long time, and because of that, the Soviet Union, India, and to this day, of course, Russia and India are still trade partners. I mean, they're not a million miles away from each other, obviously. India's kind of underneath Russia, so it's, you know, it kind of makes sense in a sense when it comes to that. Because of Russia's massive natural resources, including oil, of course, you know, that is something that is needed to feed effectively the Indian population, which is the most populous in the world now. 1.4 billion people live in India now. They've overtaken China in terms of their population. Did that a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's a big threat from Trump. It really, really is. We'll have to see if India responds, whether they will do what that think tank says and not respond for 6 months, but also not buckle under the pressure, because yeah, the US, according to those figures and those facts on there, they are doing trade with Russia. So what right do they have to go telling India what to do and what not to do? Some people will say it's hypocritical. Some people will judge India for getting that Russian oil and indirectly, of course, contributing to the Russian war effort in Ukraine. You can understand both sides of the argument in a sense. But guys, what do you think? I mean, this is a car channel normally. We want to talk about oil because it's important for cars. Most cars do, of course, run on oil these days. So this is, of course, normally just a car channel, but, you know, we branch out into things like this when it, of course, affects things like the automotive industry, and anything like this will, of course, affect it as well. But get your thoughts in the comments below. What's your take on this? Who is in the right on this one? Is Trump right to do what he's done? Is it a smart move, or will it be something that he later regrets? And what should India do in response, if anything? I want to hear what you have to say on this either way. Like, share, comment, subscribe, guys, as always, and have a fantastic day wherever in the world today, and we'll see you very soon.